Greenland's prime minister says his nation would rather remain part of Denmark than become a territory of the United States. Jens-Frederik Nielsen was speaking in a joint press conference in Copenhagen with Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. Their meeting was in response to President Trump's repeated threats to take over Greenland, which is currently an autonomous territory of Denmark. The two countries' foreign ministers are to hold talks in Washington on Wednesday with U.S. Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio. Let's hear some of what Greenland's prime minister had to say.
We are now facing a geopolitical crisis, and if we have to choose between the United States and Denmark here and now, we choose Denmark.
DW's Jack Parrock is following this story for us from Brussels. Jack, we heard the Greenlandic Prime Minister there. What else was said during that press conference?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting statement and something that we need to say is a big shift from the Greenlandic political atmosphere. In Greenland, I've spent a fair few weeks throughout 2025 there. And whenever you talk about the suggestion of the US taking over the country, they always say our priority is to become independent from the Kingdom of Denmark. Their former colonial ruler, it's now an autonomous nation, but Denmark still has a lot of control in Greenland. And what we're seeing with this very serious ramp up in rhetoric from the United States President Donald Trump and other senior officials in his administration, that the Greenlandic political establishment, which isn't very big, obviously, there's 56,000 people living in Greenland, but that all of the parties are now suggesting that actually staying within Denmark is a priority. We did also hear in that press conference the Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen. She said that the hardest part of this situation is still yet to come, that unity between Greenland and Denmark must remain strong, that NATO must remain strong as well. It was quite a sort of prominent shift in the way that the Greenlanders are talking and marks a big shift in the way this situation has changed the political discourse in Greenland.
The Danish and Greenlandic foreign ministers are set to meet U.S. Secretary of State Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance in Washington tomorrow. Do you expect any de-escalation there, or maybe the contrary even?
That's certainly what the Danes are hoping for. Lars Løkke Rasmussen, the Danish foreign minister who will participate in those meetings, he said that now is the time to remove this from the public and take it into face-to-face meetings. And he will hope that he will get serious, clear time, especially with Marco Rubio, who is sort of seen in Europe as perhaps a steadier hand than J.D. Vance, maybe, who will also participate in the meetings, someone who is more diplomatically astute, perhaps, that they can try and de-escalate this. From the Danish point of view, what they say, under agreements that were signed back in 1951, basically America can do whatever it wants. If it wants to install a ton of bases in Greenland, the Danes will let them. If it wanted to send half of its navy into the waters around Greenland to protect from Russian and Chinese ships, as Donald Trump complains, the Danes will let them. And what they say, and what the concern is in Europe and in Denmark, that this isn't really about the security that Donald Trump talks about, but is rather about the expansionism that Donald Trump wants to grow the United States. And that's the feeling in Denmark and around much of Europe at the moment.
NATO Chief Mark Rutte spoke at the Global Europe Forum earlier today and was asked about U.S. threats to take over Greenland. Let's listen to some of what he had to say.
And what I'm doing, and with the US and Canada and all our allies in Europe, is to make sure that we not only concentrate about Greenland. This is an issue about the High North. This is an issue about the Arctic territory. Let's not be naive. Even if there are not that many ships sailing at the moment, we know that with the sea lanes opening up in the High North and the Arctic, and this is not only true for Greenland, this is true for the whole Arctic area. It's not only Russia active there, it is increasingly also China being active there. So when it comes to the Arctic region, we have to work together.
Jack, a member of the NATO alliance threatening another member. What does that mean for NATO?
Yeah, that's the big question. what would happen if a territorial claim, a territorial invasion took place against another NATO member state, if Greenland was to be taken off the Kingdom of Denmark by the United States. There was a lot of pressure, many questions, including DW's own Terry Schultz. She was there on the stage pressing Mark Rutte. What would that mean? He said his job as NATO Secretary General isn't to answer that question. It's to get all the NATO members together to have discussions, and that their closed-door meetings should not be exposed in the public. There are NATO members that have conflicts and disputes, Turkey and Greece, especially over the situation in Cyprus, obviously, and both are NATO members. He is trying to de-escalate it, trying to focus NATO members to have discussions about Arctic security rather than this discussion about a potential invasion of Greenland by the United States. But he's going to have a difficult time doing that as the US continues to ramp up pressure on this claim for Greenland.
Jack Parrock in Brussels, always great to get your insights. Thanks so much.